You're watching Thriving in Chaos with Brian Benstock and Jay Abraham on CBT News.
Welcome back to Thriving in Chaos, exclusively right here at CBT News. This is part 2 of our series, Thriving in Chaos with Brian Benstock and Jay Abraham. To kick off the series in part 1, Brian shared his presentation of his vision for AI and the incredible impact it will have in the retail automotive industry. You can see that first segment here on the CBT News homepage. Now joining Brian and I for part 2 is Jay Abraham, top executive coach, business leader, founder and CEO of the Abraham Group, and author as well. He has significantly increased the bottom lines of over 10,000 clients in more than 1,000 industries. Jay's here to dig deeper and respond to Brian's ideas on how dealers can unlock opportunities and thrive. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on the show again today.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, Jay, so happy to have you here. I know that you were listening in the control room as to what Brian and I were discussing, and Brian's presentation was incredible.
It was.
As you know, as it always is. Talk to us from your perspective, because you've helped, literally, as I said in the opening, thousands of businesses out there to increase their bottom line, find new profit opportunities in their businesses. What's your take on Brian's comments today?
It's quite profound. I like the word profound. Brian likes it too. If you'll let me, I'm going to give you a 3-minute perspective before I answer, so that my approach isn't off-putting, okay?
Okay.
So my background is very interesting. I've gotten the very, very, very great privilege of looking at 1,000 industries, not businesses, from many different vantage points on a worldwide basis. And I've seen all the different ways people think and act and transact. And a concept sometimes that's common as dirt, strategy, business model, distribution, sourcing, can have the impact of a positive profit atom bomb if you're the first or the only one to apply it in your industry. So I come at everything from a vantage point, more of a strategic thinker, but of trying to look at not how everybody else does it in an industry, because the concept of a best practice sometimes is a very limited concept. It's the best practice for that industry. It has nothing to do with highest, best, most profitable, safest, fastest, most residual yielding alternative. It's just all that industry knows.
Jay, when I first heard you say that, I thought of Michael Jordan. I think of Michael Jordan worrying about best practices. It's preposterous, right? He doesn't want to be doing the best practices. He wants to dominate, right? So it's a big difference.
That's great. But I'm privileged to be here because I always looked at Brian not just as a nonlinear thinker, but really as a super logical thinker. He looks at a situation from vantage points that are so much more externally focused and walking in the shoes of the recipient. So I've made about 20 pages of random notes, but I have to tell you some of them are going to be off the wall. So I'll spew them off in like tranches of 3 or 4 or 5 and stop and see if Brian wants to respond to some or go, that's the dumbest thought I've ever heard. Why are you sitting next to me? So
Let me ask you real quick though, before you get started.
Sure.
You guys are friends. You go way back. Talk to me about how you all got together.
I'm going to age us both, Jay. I saw Jay speak in, I believe it was the Huntington Townhouse in the 80s. And I'm a young manager and really an insecure manager, right? You know, because I've got this job. I'm 28 years old. How do I keep the job?
Sure.
And Jay's talking about how to sell anything to anybody. I think was your book that you had come out with at the time, and I wanted to sell anything to anybody at the time. And I remember going to the seminar, and one of the things he said was there's only 3 ways that you can increase sales. And I thought, well, 3 things, I can do that.
I can do 3 things.
To increase the volume of sales, to increase the amount per transaction, and to increase the frequency. And ideally, you do all 3.
Right.
And that was worth the price of admission there. I've tried to use those principles throughout my career. You know, you talk about trade cycle management, of course, increasing the frequency and F&I and all the other things. So Jay's had a big impact. I bought a bunch of cassettes after that, and then my world and Jay's world separated. I had enough. I had this. Went back to the store with the profound knowledge that Jay had. Read a couple of his books after that, but we got reintroduced on Clubhouse.
Okay.
And I heard that Jay was speaking on Clubhouse. I said, oh my God, I can call in. I called Jay and I told him this same story, and he was,
that is fantastic.
You know, he was really. He said he remembered the
Yes.
seminar, not necessarily me, but remembered the seminar. And he said, "Don't tell anybody because it ages me." But
There you go.
We were there together.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's
pretty cool.
And we've been working together ever since.
And it's a privilege and an honor. A privilege and an honor. But yeah, I'll throw out some insights, and what I'm gonna share probably aren't even in the right order. They were just random impressions like Rorschach that I got. But so one of the things I'll start with is just a background. My training is in optionality, exponential performance, and looking at an asset, whether it's tangible or intangible, in terms of how to get a lot more recurring yield out of it. So everything I say is going to be predicated on that.
Okay.
Also on how to be preeminent, how to elevate the stature of your business, your people, to the role of the most trusted advisor, the only viable solution, better than the best, but somebody who they see having your best interest at heart.
Sure.
So I'm just going to go through, and I'll do 3 or 4 and let Brian. So the first thing I remembered was years ago, Peter Drucker, who died, but he was a really remarkable management consultant, had a saying, and I'm gonna probably do it a disservice, but paraphrasing, he said, if you're not constantly committed to making what you do, how you do it, who you do in your business obsolete, you can rest assured there are plenty of people that are committed to do it to and for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good starting point.
You know, Jay,
Good point.
And I think that's never been more true in the automobile industry. You look at the number of manufacturers that are coming out, right? From China has over 200 manufacturers, and you look at many billionaires now are getting into the manufacturing business here in this country. Jeff Bezos has announced that they're building a car, and many of these other startups. So, you know, if we're going to be stuck with the status quo, we're going to be replaced by these people that are bringing a completely different perspective to our industry.
And so that's got to be an overriding theme. The next thought that I have is that your process needs to be optimizing, maximizing, and then multiplying. Optimizing means making whatever you're doing the best it can be. Maximizing is, let's call it the biggest, most impactful from whatever your goals are, financial or operational. And the last is how you can really go beyond that. And I think that's what Brian is talking about. I really like that. I'm going to see if he'll respond to this. I wrote down something that has been obsessing with me. What are the rules for relevancy today? And you've got different audiences. I was working on a book a couple of years ago, never finished it, but it was called Relevancy Rules, and it was basically a play on words. It was that basically everything you do today in your world, life, business, has to do with how relevant you are seen to the other side, and it's very dynamic. It's very dynamic and how it changes. So I'd love to get your perspective on that before I go on.
Yeah, well, in marketing, I think you have to differentiate yourself from the competition. Differentiation is key, and then relevance is next, right? Because I can differentiate. We could all wear pink skirts in the dealership, and we've differentiated ourselves, but we're not relevant.
Right.
And the third hurdle you have to cross is it sustainable? You know, how do you come up with a way to differentiate yourself? How do you make that relevant to today's consumer? Each consumer having different needs, and then how do you sustain that? And I think that AI can really help us do that better than we've ever had the opportunity to do it before. To be able to target the right message to the right customer at the right time.
Good answer. Get an A. So I was taught early in my life, way before data analysis and segmentation, that the data speaks, but you have to know the questions to ask it. So I'm just giving you a workshop.
Well, I think that's true. That, you know, and that's always the interesting thing about, let's say, a reverse risk. Not reverse risk. Well, reverse risk, or when you look at a composite, let's say from NCM. We can both look at the same composite or a financial statement, and we see different things. And so it's not only observing the data, but being able to understand the data as it's relevant to what you're looking to accomplish. So, and what you spoke about just now is the query, the questions that you ask, and the deeper the understanding of the subject matter, the better the query, the better outcome. Or Robin Sharma, better information, better daily decisions, better outcomes.
That's right.
That's really where we're at today. How do we come up with better outcomes? And it certainly starts by asking better questions.
A good answer. Again, A+.
I'm a student.
It's good. No, I'm just throwing these out. I mean, my job is I said this. I'm not the AI guy. He's the play-by-play. I'm the color. I have a belief system, and it's served me and my clients well. And I want to hear yours. I don't think anybody needs to compete on an equal playing field, but I think if they want to basically have sustainable advantage, they have to learn to think at a very different level.
Well, that's true, and I think that's part of what we're talking about right now. Is to really, I'm pushing myself, right, to say, hey, we've done some great things. I'm telling the whole staff, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
We're 23, number one in the country. So what? That's the meal that you ate a week ago. It's not serving you today, and what would somebody do? That it's a really great question, right? What would you do to put yourself out of business? Because we all know our own Achilles tendon, and what are the things that you would do? And I think what you said, as you quoted Drucker, because you can best believe somebody else is trying to figure out how to put you out of business.
That's right.
And today, the likes of Elon Musk are doing it, Estella Lee are doing it, Amazon may be doing it.
That's right.
Carvana is certainly trying to do it. So you've got a lot of forces there, and a host of other people that are not yet in our industry that are looking at it.
That's right. That's right. Good, very good point.
So the next thing I wrote down was just an insight, because I'm trained on levers. And if you think about it, in our personal life, from who knows how long back, our life has been enhanced. It's been made easier and far richer by levers, whether it's a screwdriver, light switch, crank on a window, broom, push button for a door, pop top can. But I don't think people realize how many levers exist in a business that they're not pulling.
Yeah, you had asked me a lot of questions not too long ago about identifying the levers and the profound implication of improving each of these little levers by a small amount.
Right.
And so if we said, could you, and I used what you were talking about this morning, something about cost cutting. I want to get to a certain cost reduction at one of the stores. And I said to the controller, let's just take 3% off of all of these expenses, right down, and the impact of that will be really significant without, brutally attacking the store. Many people, when they look at cutting costs in a dealership, Jay, they look at personnel and advertising.
Right.
And well,
it's the easiest lever to pull.
But and they're the two most important resources you've got.
That's right.
There's so many. There are so many things that you can cut. So so I think that the levers and having an understanding of those levers is critical, because just as you can, by reducing cost with each of the levers, have a profound impact, by enhancing the performance on each of the levers, you can have a very exponential impact.
So you know this, you may not, maybe you do. I've had this great fortune of helping over 300 world-class experts, and none of them came to me for help with their expertise, but I had to learn a distillation. And one of them was the Deming organization.
Yeah, sure.
And that's where I learned the power of many incremental improvements combining to give you exponential, very safe, very predictable, very significant growth. And I'm telling you that because one of the notes I wrote was, as you're talking, the exponential capability is dramatically enhanced because you have 5 or 6 businesses you can do it with at the same time. That's where, to me, it's exhilarating.
Within the existing business.
Within the existing dealership.
And I look at it, it's like a diamond. There's so many different facets on that
Great
diamond.
analogy.
Each single one. Because we have a new desk manager, and I was teaching him not to think, small, to look at each of those different facets of the diamond being improved, whether it be the trade-in, the upfront gross, the back-end gross, referral, every different aspect of it to get to maximize that particular opportunity. And I think he started to get it because he was thinking really in a binary way and saying it's more than just cost versus gross. There's so many other variables in there.
Sure.
And it's fun again to be back working, and I'm working again on the showroom floors. The chaos gets out there. I want to make sure I have an understanding, and it's giving me a new perspective as I'm trying to integrate some of the AI solutions in with the modern day person at a desk or on the showroom floor.
Right. Yeah, that's always a great exercise. Whenever the GM
you can't do
or
it from
dealer
the ivory tower,
no,
and we don't have an ivory tower, but you
Right.
can get locked into your office and lose sight of what's going on, 20 feet away from you.
Yeah. Was that new desk manager? Did they come from the showroom floor?
Yeah, he
They
came
did,
from the
okay.
showroom floor,
Yeah.
but I think he was looking at things in a very, very limited way, and I get it. And he's trying to play it safe. I get it.
Yeah.
But and today I found many of the people were too busy working with the computer,
Sure.
And not listening and understanding what the head of the customer is,
Sure.
and to being able to read the defense there. And I think that's, any of us that have been pretty good at the desk understand that that's really where it's at. Just give me a yellow pad and a pen, and I'm okay. Keep your computer.
I love that. The next little note I made to myself was a question, because the biggest observation I've made when any kind of transformative or incremental change is required is it's really hard for people. They contemplate, they procrastinate, they equivocate, but taking action sometimes is a lot more effort. Ironically, procrastinating really is more energy. But how hard is it? You showed us those 4 examples of the agent, and I'd ask you, I'm setting you up for this, but did it take you a month to create that?
No, it was pretty easy to create, because when I looked at the team, their sales pitch, they were showing just the one call. And so you listen to a bot handle a sales call, and that in and of itself is not impressive. It is, but it's not. But as you start thinking about what that could lead to, that's where I think it becomes really interesting, if not profound.
Yeah.
The thought that you could have thousands of calls being handled. So as people are concerned about AI eliminating jobs, I'm thinking, what if I could do 1,000 more transactions a month? That's going to increase the amount of jobs that we have. It's going to increase the opportunities for all of us. It's going to increase the finance income, the used car income, the new car income, the parts income there. And then the other part of that, you have problems or difficulties hiring people overnight that are competent to answer the telephones, but now AI can have some solutions there. And so I think that it came to me when I was looking at it, the actual company that controlled that was thinking statically, and I was thinking more expansively. And so I think that if we continue to do that, I think it'll help us.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to make just an interventional comment for anybody watching. When Brian talks about those bigger visions, you might go, oh, I don't know if that's possible. I've studied what I'll call exponentiality, how to take performance way beyond where you are from time, effort, opportunity, access to the market, investment and capital, human capital, relational capital. And if anybody watching happens to be a mathematician and you want to study exponentiality and taking performance at least to exponential as opposed to beyond, there are 5 gradients that exist above exponentiality. I can't remember what they are. Tetration, heptation, pentation, I guess another tation.
I'll take exponential.
No, but the point is that people go, oh, I couldn't do that. What I found is many people, and this is a time of chaos and transition, but they can be thinking they're doing really well, and you can actually be successfully stuck and you don't even know it because you don't know how much more yield you can get out of those assets called your business.
Yeah.
Successfully stuck is the key. And I think we've all been there. And good to great obviously addresses that you're not overwhelmed, overjoyed, but you're okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest fear, is that you get successfully stuck. And I think that's what we're looking at now. I'm running around Paragon like, the British are coming, to prepare for the unknown. And we're in uncertain times. So you've got to do what you can with what you've got, in front of you and try and drown out the noise.
Dave Anderson's got a line, a quote that he says, "Prosperity drains urgency." And it's so true, especially as we all came off in the industry making a ton of money during COVID, and even still, where, to your point, dealerships are doing better now than they were in 2019. So sometimes it's hard to change the mindset of the dealer that says, we're not going to cover off the ball with units and net profit, right?
Well, what's that saying? Dig your well before you're thirsty. And I think that that's really important for us to do right now, because tomorrow we could have a news headline, God forbid, that dramatically turns everything upside down. Something happens in Ukraine, something happens in the Middle East, they could have a dramatic impact on us here, or something happens domestically, God forbid. So I think we don't want to be smug, because what's that saying? Be humble or be humbled, and we don't want to be humbled. I think this is a time. For me personally and our team, is we're getting back to work and really working hard. And I love the responsiveness. A couple of people have checked out, said, "Yeah, this isn't for me," which is okay. And a couple of people say, "Hey, I like the attention. I'm glad you're back in it, Benstock. Great, let's do it."
That's great.
And so it's rewarding.
That's good.
I got bigger list. So there's two variables that I'm going to introduce, and they're similar. One is the power of what's called knowledge asymmetry, but understanding stuff from a vantage point nobody else does, and acting on it. So, but there's also a counter to that, and it's been called the alpha mindset. It's committing to get outsized or asymmetric upside out of everything you're doing, but de-risking the down. So I'm just throwing it out to see how you respond.
Well, I think having profound knowledge has always been an advantage, right, to any of us. And one of the ways that I think you talk about us getting that is taking a look at outside the industry where somebody's doing that already, and then bringing it to your industry. You didn't have to create it. You didn't have to invent it. You just made it relevant to the industry that you're in. And I saw these brothers here that take companies in the U.S. and they bring the same company to Europe, and they change the name. And they're having incredible success. They just take the business model and change it. And in fact, one or two of the companies that they did that with partnered with them over there. Said, "That's great. We want to expand there," and they've become, I think, billionaires doing that. So, I think we're looking for, and I'm really at the beginning of my career, ways that I can do things that would give me some insights. And one of the ways recently, I went to Kazakhstan, and I thought I was going to look at the past in the automobile industry, and I happened to see the future by going there. It was really a great insights to see the impact that the Chinese auto manufacturers are having on that industry, and knowing that's coming here. So how do I set up our fishing nets? How do I set up our chessboard so that we can thrive in that next wave of competition? Because the competition is not going to stop.
No.
It's not going to go away.
No.
And you can put tariffs there. There's going to be ways around it, I'm sure. So we have to prepare for that.
That's right.
I'm loving your answers. So the next thing I'm going to say is interesting. So I gave birth. You mentioned two areas that I love, and that's, I've got something that I created years ago, and I think it's what you were alluding to. I call it funnel vision versus tunnel vision. What it means is you borrow success approaches from outside the industry where none of your competitors understand them. And you talked about Viagra, and you talked about something else, but just to reinforce it. So fiber optics that literally transformed telecommunication did not come from telecommunication. It came from aerospace and was borrowed. You talked about the pen. Rogaine came from pimple medicine, roll-on deodorant. That you talked about the #1 baby buggy it manufactured, does $500 million. They borrowed the collapsible wheels from airplanes. FedEx would not exist, and neither would the whole industry if Fred Smith didn't borrow what's called hub and spoke overnight instant processing that the Federal Reserve Bank uses. So there's plenty of precedent for looking outside, not inside, for breakthroughs. But that stated, I have a suggestion. You talked about agents, and I think it's in the beginning, but you can use an agent for two different things. You can have an agent constantly monitoring everyone to see what new innovative things your local, your national competitors are doing, but you can also have the agent monitor by category. You want to know about service, you want to know about follow, you want to know about anything anybody's doing, and the cost is almost going to be nothing to have that kind of outrageous intelligence, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think life experiences can really open up the doors for us. Peter Lynch wrote a book many years ago. He was the founder of the Magellan Fund, and he went up on Wall Street. And I remember the book was in the 80s or 90s, but in the book he talked about using your life experience to make investing decisions. You go to the mall and there's a long line outside the Gap. You may take a look at some of the stock, and he said, "Isn't it ironic that many of the people that worked at these companies that are working day and night, they're busy, never invested $10 in the company." The answer was right there, or Apple. And when I read his book, in fact, way back when, I bought a Macintosh SE, and I read that book about that time, and I invested a little bit of money in Apple at the time. And I sold it. I made a little bit of money. I got off the train way too early. But it made sense, because I was using that little SE to in the Excel spreadsheets that I'd never used before to monitor some properties I had. And it was a fantastic tool. And so I think you can use your life experiences and when you go to a Starbucks and you experience a checkout process, how can that be adapted to the dealership? When someone delivers something to you and there's a follow-up that thanks you for it, how can that be adapted? When you have a great dentist that sends you a confirmation of an appointment, we're all in the business of setting appointments, you realize that was really great. That confirmation text was relevant. It was great. I was able to respond. It was responsive. It wasn't an auto thing. And would that help my show rate for appointments that we have in the dealership? So I think there was opportunities all around us.
That's a great answer. So the next little scribble I had, I have a very strong belief, and I've shared it with you. I don't think I've shared it with you, Jim, that a business is very much like a hedge fund. And in that business, you have a lot of assets, tangible and intangible. And you have yield and you have risk, and most people don't really understand it. But there's a lot of assets you don't think about. Opportunities an asset, efforts an asset, interaction with people's an asset, and all of them have variability. I was trained in variability. You do something one way, it's X. You do it another, it can be 2X. You do another, it can be 5X. And that's, I'm obsessed with that, because it's one thing to have a superior ad or sales approach, but you know this about me. We've tested sometimes 30 ways of doing or saying something, and one could outpull another by 3 or 4 times in terms of closure, average sale, profit, setting somebody else for the next, setting them up for the next. So I want you to sort of think about that, but I believe there's 2 kinds of business people. 2D and 3D investors. And I think a 2D is somebody who looks at revenue minus expense equal static profit. And the 3D, and I admire that, I think you're very much that. They're looking at, like a PE firm would, or a real investor, serious, what's the ongoing yield we're going to get out of that asset? So comment on any or none of those. I don't care.
You mentioned many years ago to me, how do you get, you've got the sunk cost of acquiring a customer. And now it's how do you maximize the opportunities within that sunk cost. And it really changed the way that we looked at things. You look at your sales and service department, that customer's captured already. And you've got an expense on ordinary sales of anywhere from $300 to $500 a car to capture a customer. What if you applied some of that to doing a better job with your internal customers already? Spending money to resell the customer you've already got. Because that's the best customer you have. The best customer to have is the one you already have.
No question.
And you look at a company like Apple that has incredible retention. They're not spending the money on advertising new products, but on retaining the existing products that they've got. And we have a pretty good return to market at Paragon. We're better than 50% for a metropolitan store. I'm told that's pretty good. But when you compare that to Amazon's return to market of 99%, 99% thereabouts of their customers come back, you say, wow, what an opportunity for us. And that delta there, that 50 or 40 point delta for us it can be really significant.
Millions of dollars.
It's fascinating. So I'm going to introduce a thought, and then I'm going to ask you how it seems to relate or whether it does. So I learned earlier in my career that all buyers aren't worth the same, all sources aren't worth the same, all ads don't generate the same value, but most people aggregate them when they allocate a cost. So I want to spend $100 a lead, as opposed to that this category of lead is going to be 3 times more profitable or twice as convertive as this, but I'm going to spend the same amount. So I'm throwing that out. But before you answer, I think with the AI and the predictability it's got, it can help you allocate and not generalize investment, because it's all about the yield you're getting on your investment, and it's an aggregate of time, who you align it with, the recipient, the salespeople. So I'm giving you a complex comment.
Well, I think it's absolutely right. You know, you taught me a long time ago, one of your tapes, when you talked about cell phones, and you presented to the cell phone provider, hey, the cost of the phone is $2,500, and at the time it was.
Yeah.
And you said, how much is the average bill? And the average phone bill was about $800 at the time. So why don't you just give the phones away? And
The
you
money's
put them on
in
a
the bill.
contract, the money is in the
Right,
bill.
right.
And so we actually did a campaign where we were giving away it was a bag phone back it was in the 80s, because I remember it was a
Yes,
PS Honda.
I remember.
At bag phone, and giving it away. And we absolutely crushed it.
Yeah.
And understanding that the cost of us giving away the phone was negligible.
Yep.
As it related to the cost of acquiring the customer.
Sure.
When it comes to campaigns and figuring out what the cost of the customers are, there are better customers than others. So how do you use AI to mine the customers with the highest statistical probability of doing business with you now,
Yeah.
at a higher churn rate and a higher gross profit? And if you present that query
Yeah.
to the right intelligence, you're going to get those answers, you know, and that exists now. I was talking with Danny from VinQ the other day, and I said,
Yeah,
Danny,
yeah.
how do we automate? You know, let's find out what cars we turn the quickest. Let's find out which cars give us the highest gross profit, and then let's get the number. There's a number, and it's in the database.
Yeah, yeah.
And then let's develop a strategy
Yeah.
to reach out to those customers. And maybe, Jay, and this is what we're talking about here, we reach out to those customers and we offer them a $5 oil change
Yeah.
to drive into the dealership. And we spiff the porter when they come in, and we spiff the service advisor. So now we're losing a fortune on that oil change.
Well, perhaps.
But it's an investment.
Understanding.
If you're an investment, you're not.
That's
right.
exactly right.
That's right.
But yeah, you can probably, I'm imagining, use the AI to give you correlations. If you do this, you're going to get 3 times these people to buy, and it's, you know, in 6 months, 9 months. But I love that. I just thoroughly love that.
We did that, by the way, with Andrew Diff 100 years ago when he was working with us and Facebook, and we spent $500. And the goal was to spend $500 and see what yield we could get out of $500. And we sold.
When you say 500 a head?
At total.
Okay, total.
And what
With
happened?
Facebook. And
Okay.
now, privacy was a little different then.
Yeah.
But we skimmed through the customers, a select group of customers in our database. We shot to their Facebook accounts an unbelievable offer. And you know, it's another thing in how to sell anything to anybody. You have to have unbelievable offers that are true. You know,
Yeah.
irresistible offers,
Yeah.
I think is the word you used in the book. And we sent that irresistible offer out. We sold 60 cars
Wow.
for $500.
Oh, my
That's
God.
incredible.
And the amount of service we did. And again, you can't replicate that today, but Facebook was showing off this case study, and we're telling them, stop, we don't want everybody doing that.
Right.
But I think it was analogous to what's going on today.
Yeah.
You know, if you're hunting for fish with the right fish finder, you're going to have a better catch.
Yeah,
You're
of
going to
course.
catch more fish.
Of course, yeah.
No, I love that. I have a belief system that business is analogous to billiards, not pool, but billiards, not with pockets. And that every move is designed to set up the next and the next. But if you don't know the game you're really playing, and you're playing a short game instead of a long, you're never going to win the match. Comment?
I think that's where a lot of us dealers, and myself included, struggle with really setting up the next shot and the next shot. And billiards is, I don't pretend to know the rules, but I do know one shot is setting up the next shot. And so how do you set that up? And I think we're getting there, you know, in the analogy of the planes circling the airport. I think if you don't think expansively for the moment, just say, is a 36-month lease, what would the optimal communication strategy be like with that customer during the lease? And of course, thank you for your business. Thank you.
Yeah.
Was everything good? Hey, send us some customers. So you've got referrals, and of course, do it better than that. But that's the initial communication. Let me set up your first appointment for service, and then it's 3 months. Let me check in. Is there anything else I can do for you? Hey, who else would be interested in your car? Blah blah. And have that set up the ideal 36-month communication strategy for that particular customer, and then do that for all your customers.
Right.
And have it automated, but have it where it's also custom, where it's referring to you with your name, it's referring to your car by its color and the mileage. It's personalized, and I think that's what everybody wants, right? It's customized scalability.
So
Speak to me directly.
I love that. You set me up for a comment. I think it's a good question. You can also use AI to evaluate and rank probability of result. So you can say, okay, not just if I send this communication, but here's 7 different approaches I'm contemplating. Which one will be the best? And if I want to do them in sequence, which one will be the best second, third, fourth, and why? And how can I make it even more? You can do all that. And it's just, all you have to do is ask it.
Yeah, it's endless.
Same thing we're asked.
Yeah, the problems that you can solve, we now have a real viable solution today, an intelligence that can give you the knowledge of the best automobile dealers in the country, an aggregate of all of them, to help solve the problems that we face in the dealership, and then go outside the industry and ask these
Which we
questions.
can learn so much from. I mean, in the industry, we have always have those auto industry blinders on.
Yeah, for sure.
That say, oh, it's not going to work in the car business. You don't know my market. You don't know the auto industry.
Yeah,
and meanwhile, there's all of
I used to say, when someone said, you don't know my market, I say, I know you have females and males, and I have males and females.
That's hilarious.
That's
right.
I love that.
It doesn't really vary all that much.
Do you have any car buyers in your market? Any drivers?
You just might.
So I have a thought. It's a very plebeian way of using AI, but in the course of a dealership, and you've got, I don't know, 50, 100 employees, 200 employees, every day they probably have issues, challenges, questions, opportunities that they either are posed or they have. If every one of them just took one of those every day and posed it to whatever you loved, whether it was ChatGPT, Grok, and you just got the answer and you pulled it, what would that be worth?
Yeah, the cumulative effect of that could be pretty significant. For sure.
And the goal is to make you a little bit better in every area. That was the whole thing from Deming. If you have 10 different every process, people don't realize, every process has within it sub-processes. And if you can make every one of the sub-processes 5, 10, 15% better, you can make the performance of that process hundreds better, and the cumulative effect it's off the charts.
Well, I think while we're talking about all this intelligence and machines and processes, I think we have to remember also we're in the people business.
That's right.
And we have to humanize it for our people. We have to make them not afraid of the technology, but to embrace and become warriors, champions with the technology. I think that when they can see an improvement, everything's with them. Right? What's in it for me?
That's right.
If they can see that improvement in their own life, and they see it in their wallet, in their pocketbook, they're going to have the trust.
So true.
Because right now everyone's looking over their shoulder.
Yeah.
What are you looking to do? Well, in my department? Oh, the BDC, you're going to replace me with this. No, we don't want to replace you with the machine. I don't want the machine representing us. I want it assisting us. And think of what you can do in the service department if you can make it easier for people to do business. We've had some good success. I think we're just at the beginning of the success that's available to us.
That's right.
And eliminate the need for customers to have to come to the dealership altogether for service or for anything. I mean, when we think of, again, we can take a picture and it's developed. You used to have to go to a photo, place and drive there and drop the film off and come back. And so when we were going through the sales process, we said, what if the best sales process is the elimination of the process altogether? We had this shopping cart analogy, and you think of when you go to a supermarket, and I've done it, not anymore, but I've done it. And you take you get a shopping cart, you go inside, and you start loading up the shopping cart, and you walk through each aisle, and it's designed where you have to go through every alley, just about every aisle, and you load up the shopping cart, and then you go to check out. Now what do? Well, you unload the shopping cart, right? You unload the shopping cart and you pay. Then what do? You reload the shopping cart, right? And you go out to your car. Then what do? You unload the shopping cart. Then what do? You go home and then you unload the car.
Yeah.
Or you can communicate with Whole Foods online and have it delivered to your front door.
That's
and
right.
I tell this story. I was at NYU taking a disruptive thinking class, and they were asking us to redesign the shopping cart. This is how the whole story came out. And I drew a box, and I drew another box, and I drew an arrow. And then we had artists in the class. They were drawing these beautiful shopping carts that had refrigerated areas. And the professor looked at this and said, "What is this?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, this is my redesign of the shopping cart. It's you call from your home and you have the food delivered directly to your house." He said, "But that wasn't the assignment." I said, "But it's the solution." And he said, "Well," and he sort of blew it off. And God strike me dead, a week later, Amazon bought Whole Foods for $28 billion. Yeah. I sent him the picture of the show. I said, "It's not a bad idea, right?"
That's so funny.
But perhaps the best improvement in the sales process is its elimination.
Yeah.
To make it just easy for people to point, click, buy,
right.
and then eventually just use voice. I want this delivered to my front door.
And we've seen disruptors such as Carvana and Vroom, who's arguably not around anymore, but we have seen those disruptors come in where somebody can then click, buy the car, not test drive it yet, have it delivered to them, all the financing is done, and away they go.
Yeah, but use your life experience. I've purchased cars that are not Hondas, right? And I've never gone to a dealership except once recently. I just bought a car.
Yeah.
But never go to the dealership. Just have it shipped to my house.
Yeah.
And so if I want that, so do other people.
That's right.
I don't go to a dealership for service.
Yeah.
You pick it up. I can't be sitting in a lobby reading a newspaper or magazine or texting on my phone. Just pick it up.
Right.
97% of the time we're not driving our car.
Yeah.
So make better use of that
That's
time.
right. That's right.
And I think that's, if we can do that in every facet of what we're doing, just make it easier for people to do business, I think you'll do a lot more business.
That's right. That's right.
I love those answers. I'm going to, some of the things I'm going to say, you're going to have fun with. So you talked about your hypothetical round table back then.
Yeah.
But
that's right out of Think and Grow Rich, right? You got your master group.
Yeah, but here's with AI, you can say, how would Jeff Bezos address this? How would
that's a good point.
How would Einstein address this?
I'm afraid of the answer.
I know,
Get rid of those dealers.
But it will basically research. It will formulate mindset. It will address it and give you an answer.
Yeah.
Now, even if that answer isn't what you want, the whole key to everything is opening up your worldview.
Thought starters, right?
Yeah.
And we had so many bad ideas around pickup and delivery, but they led us to the good idea.
Yeah.
And I was just recently telling a young colleague of mine, because sometimes he would be restrictive, and I said, when you whiteboard things, everything's good. We're going to make this guy that we want to fire, we're going to make him the president of the company. Wow, that's ridiculous. Let's see where it takes us. And we're going to do that. And put it all on the whiteboard. And many times the initial ideas are terrible, but they lead you to the right idea. And that's what had happened. We were going to have 4 garages in the city. We're going to have customers drop the cars off at the garage. We're going to have a truck pick up the cars. And as you're describing it, it's ridiculous. But it led us to, what would Scholes do?
Sure.
Where would he, because there was a Honda dealership in the city, and they closed that dealership. And the question was, how could we service the customers in Manhattan better than the dealer was able to service it while he had a store there?
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to not just adequately do it. How could we do a better job?
Right.
And it was where would we put the Honda dealership, our imaginary Honda dealership? And it was one on every corner. And how could we do that, right? And it led to the cell phone. Put the dealership on the cell phone, pick up the car, and you had the naysayers within my group saying it's going to cost too much. Sure. But there were a lot of things that we learned from doing that. The average repair order was double when we picked it up, because when people say, I don't understand that. American Honda didn't understand it. They said, well, that's because there were a lot of lapsed customers. But 2-3 years later, the order was still
you're still doing it. Yeah.
And then you walk somebody through, and you say you've waited 45 minutes to get your car written up. You're waiting in the lobby for 45 minutes. You got the car up in the lift, and they say, Jim, in addition to your oil change, you need brakes. Jim has 2 questions. What are they?
How much and how fast?
How much and how long?
That's
exactly
right.
that.
That's right.
And so we've taken the time out of the equation, and time is more valuable than money today. If you can save me time, I'll pay you more money.
That's right.
And in our case, what happened was customers don't reject service that's necessary when we've got the car and not tying up their time. They're more than happy to get it done.
Yeah,
Now, they'll still ask how much. Hey, I need a discount, which is fair.
Sure.
But they're more likely to give us the okay.
Right.
And I think that was another area where we're losing the independence because we diagnosed the car. The guy says, "Get me out of here." They'd go home, realize they needed that work, and they just drop it off at their local gas station and get it done. So, I think there was a lot of learnings that we got. It was a return on learning, ROL, that we were able to get by making it easier. We thought the benefit was going to be in retention of customers. We never dreamed it would be in the profitability.
That is so profound. So there's a subtlety that you sort of throw away that I don't think most of the people watching Brian's discussion with me and his comments earlier will grasp. So you have probably all your life gone outside for expanded knowledge. You talked about you were at NYU. I happen to know that you put a lot of money out, and you and your team went to Harvard to learn about macro AI. You read books all the time. I want to get you to comment on that because I think a lot of people don't want to travel outside.
It wasn't Harvard. It was MIT.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And we took a very intense course in AI through MIT, and it was scary because it was telling you, hey, this is where this is all going, and it made me realize how far behind we were. Murat Deljanin and I both separately took the course, and it was great because you literally had to put an hour and a half a day in, and on Tuesday was test day. And I said to my wife, I'm too old for this stuff. I'm cramming I'm cramming for a test. But a couple of, again, learnings from the learning. It's great to have a deadline. So you learn for the week, and you've got a test, and you've got to make sure you've got the knowledge for the deadline. It's also exciting to get that additional knowledge. But the challenge there is like anything else. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
That's right.
And so that and I'm somewhat overwhelmed by the opportunities, and that's why I'm here. I'm here looking for AI solutions. I hope there's somebody from outside the auto industry that says, I can help that guy, and reaches out to me and says, hey, why don't you, let's get together on this, and let's build this together. My company does, and I've reached out to a couple of companies, but it's finding the right balance to develop some of this with. And we're having some fun with outbound calls being made by bots to customers that have open recalls. And the success has been pretty good.
Is it really?
So you realize that every one of us has open recalls, and how do we develop technology to be able to reach out and cost effectively handle those calls? That's exciting.
I like that. I'm almost done, thank goodness. But
well, you took a lot of notes.
I did. So I want to make a comment which is going to be counter to what you're saying, but it's going to feed what you're saying. So most people think that a breakthrough has to be tectonic. It has to be upending the business, and that's what you're advocating. But in order to get there, sometimes it can be expensive, time-consuming. People don't realize that you have residing in any business, and I think in a dealership more so, the ability to apply breakthrough lenses on everything from how you get, you call it an up, a lead, a prospect, how you close them, what you do afterwards, your sales, your marketing, your strategy, your business. And all those can be done to free up a lot more revenue that can fund all this transition.
Well, I think that's well said. If you look at Apple, they were a computer company.
Right.
And it was their decision to go outside of computers that made them go from $100 billion to $1 trillion corporations. And you've got to keep your core business model strong. That gives you, and in fact, enhance that so it throws off additional revenue so that you can have your disruptive growth solution, your disruptive business model. And like I said, keep that core going strong as you have this disruptive team, the Skunkworks team, developing it. And eventually, Apple's disruptive technologies like the iPod and the cell phone take over and eclipse the computer business, which was once their core. And so what if Paragon's AI division starts out small, all of a sudden we start asking great questions like, I have 753 Hondas, how can I sell them in 24 hours for a 3% margin? And the AI gives, what if it gave me the solution to be able to do that? And all of a sudden we order another 700 cars, So it is where you start out incrementally, right? And it's not earth shattering. A couple of guys were talking to me about the Amazon project where they started selling cars through Hyundai, and we saw something that they sold 6 cars or something like that. And a friend said, see, that it's not so easy. And I said, no. If they can learn to sell one, they could learn to sell 6,000.
That's right.
600,000.
That's right.
It's that incremental.
Yeah.
Learn how to do it. Learn how to do it right. It doesn't have to be.
That's right.
Devastatingly popular overnight.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
getting that started. And that's a Galloway quote. It's amazing how long things take and shocking how fast they happen.
I know.
And that's what happens.
I'm going to stop with the next comment. I've got 5 more pages, but I probably beat you up enough. I like to reframe things or change the semantic way somebody looks at it. So I'm going to ask a question of everybody and for you, and I'm going to try to contextualize it so it makes sense. So the question is, what is your and your team's time worth? And I don't mean what you're paying them. What is it worth now? How much do you want it to be worth? They don't have 24/7. I mean, they only have 24/7. They don't have that great of intellectual superiority. How are you going to get them and their time to be worth more so that your payoff is worth more? So that's my ending comment, and you can address it any way you want or not.
I may not give you the answer that I want to hear.
I have no expectation.
I think the biggest upside for us at the dealership is for us to figure out how to put intelligence in every associate's hands, every employee's hands, every vendor's hands that works for Paragon.
Yeah.
And the cumulative effect of having this intelligence in a tangible way in the hands of our 500 employees or 470 employees, I think could be really massive for the dealership. And not just, they're going to have access to it, but again, it's like having the internet and looking at cat videos. No, we want to say, hey, how do you make your job better with AI, and to really put that in people's hands and empower them to be able to make decisions. And I've got a long way to go to be a better leader, to lead in this new direction, to really cultivate the brain power of all of our people. I was at a meeting for a team, and I watched the leaders of the company sit back, and they conducted the Monday morning meeting. It wasn't Monday morning, it was Wednesday. And they let the employees run the meeting. And they had a facilitator, and the facilitator went to each of the departments and said, what's your big win for today? And Sarah stood up and said, we had a customer who was really upset, and we solved it, and we resolved it in half the time it would normally take. Yeah, everyone collapsed. Yeah. And they went around the room with things like that. And I'm sitting there saying, it's so basic, but it's so impactful that they were talking each other up. And I love that young skunk works entrepreneur kind of attitude. And I think that if we can have that at our age, I'm 64, if I can be like a startup and behave like a startup, I think that'll be very good for our dealerships.
Yeah, no question about it.
I'm done.
Yep. Brian Benstock and Jay Abraham, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Jay, thank you.
Thank you for letting me.
Thriving in Chaos. I know that our dealer community is going to get a lot out of your visit with us here today, so thank you so much.
They should reach out to Jay. He's a wealth of knowledge.
There's no question about it.
He's a book on a shelf that I read often.
That's right.
Very great analysis. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. Thanks to both of you. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for watching Thriving in Chaos on CBT News.